We are live here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show. We are the Draft Sickos, and we are so excited to have you guys joining us tonight. I'm your host, Stephen Gillaspie, and joining me for this brand new season of the Draft Sicko Show here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed is my brand new co-host, Jam Hines. Jam, how are we doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to go on this podcast journey with you and interact with the different viewers that we have and the audience. It's going to be a great time, a great season, and a great cycle.
No doubt, no doubt. So, Jam, we got a lot that we're going to dive into today. But first, we're going to open up the show from here, moving on with a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm going to dive into some things. So over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, Maxwell has continued his No Stone Unturned series with the Wings Part 2. That is out and available to be read by all of you guys. Rowan Kent has dropped his latest edition of the Ouija Wonderings. I thought that was a fantastic read as well. I love when he does like this episode or like edition was powered by all the things. He drops some real good gems in there, stuff that'll make you laugh out loud. Metcalf dropped his written work on AJ Dybantsa with the New Man on Campus series that he does on the preseason. And then this brand new feed that our team is being featured on now, Jam, the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings, that has already been rolling. Metcalf and Rucker have a breakdown on Darryn Peterson. Nathan Grubel and Maxwell Baumbach have a breakdown on Tyrone Riley and A.K. Okekere. I think I got that right. And then Corey and Albert also have a breakdown on AJ Dybantsa. And then on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and our podcast feed, the one that y'all are listening to right now, the Tylers recently did a redraft of the 2018 NBA draft. And Metcalf also has released his film breakdowns on AJ Dybantsa and Cam Boozer. So the bills are paid now, Jam. Yeah. Let's, before we dive into the heart of today's show, everybody watching and live tuning in, thank you all so much for doing that. We look a little bit different as far as Draft Sickos has looked over years past. I want to give a big shout out, a big salute, both literally and metaphorically, to our dear friend Maxwell Baumbach, who we kind of teased this at the end of the last show that he and I did together. He talked about it on the episode that he did with Nathan, but schedule change, things just kind of in the works, so reshuffling of the deck. He is over doing great work with Nathan, and I have been bumped up to be the lead host here on the Draft Sicko show, and I couldn't think of a better person. Thank you. I couldn't think of a better person who personifies what being a Draft Sicko is more than my new co-host, Jam Hines. Jam, how are you feeling about this new journey that we're about to be embarking on together, brother?
Man, you're far too kind. I appreciate you and Maxwell giving me the Sicko's blessing, and I'm looking forward to and very excited to continue to live up to that. My background has been in scouting. It was kind of crazy to think about. I've been doing this professionally for a little over a decade, 13 years to be exact, which is very crazy to kind of say out loud.
Because you're not old enough to say stuff like that now.
I know, right?
You're a young man.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to get my start under Alon Vinokurov with the scouting and consulting agency way back when. He's now doing an awesome job with the Lakers as a scout there. And my second year with No Ceilings, I'm looking for that sophomore jump, not the sophomore slump. So I'm excited to get this going with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. This is going to be a lot of fun for everyone who has just been kind of following along. We've been talking, in our Discord chat for all of our No Ceiling Plus members. We've dropped some Easter eggs in there. We've been teasing it on our socials. Jam, we still have a lot more to give the audience out there. We've already given a lot so far with some of the things that are going to be going on with No Ceilings this year. There's so much more that we're going to unfold when the time is right. I don't get paid nowhere near enough to be the one to get to spill the beans on all those fun things. So I'm going to leave that to the powers that be. And one of the things, Jam, that you and I said that we want to kind of focus on this year is talking about a little bit more draft philosophy, some team building things like that. We're going to be talking about some draft philosophy. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about 3 can't-miss prospects. By all accounts, Jam, these guys that we're going to be talking about today have at one point or another, already before this year has even kicked off, have had been the number one prospect within this class or are already heavily vying for and contending for that top spot. Before we dive into all of these players' individual games, Jam, though, I want to talk to you just a little bit about what a can't miss prospect is in your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought this up. And, I think one of the things that's important for us to kind of level set this conversation about what a can't miss prospect is. My definition could be different than yours, Stephen, and then other people as well, too. And I know it kind of at times can be looked at as semantics, but a lot of times it's more than semantics, and it's something that can really shape an evaluation of why someone sees a player differently. So I think stuff like this is incredibly important. So for me, a can't miss prospect is someone that has a safe floor and a high upside, and like within that, you're kind of looking for at minimum an all-star level talent who can be an anchor or a pillar for you at least on one end of the floor, whether it's an offensive engine, or a defensive anchor. So that's kind of what I look for in a can't miss prospect. How do you feel about that? What's kind of your definition of a can't miss prospect?
I agree with you in a lot of ways. And shout out again, everybody taking the time to hang out with us on a Sunday afternoon live. If you're listening to us on the podcast feed on a Monday, we love you. We want to spend time with you on Sunday evenings, though. So I know that there's a lot competing for your time. If you can, come hang. Eric Weiss in the chat says defining terms is critical. Yeah, I always say, man, words matter. So can't
Yes.
miss prospects. The way that I look at it, though, Jam, I try to dumb it down as easy as I can. It's how far are you from your peers within your own draft class? That's where I like to start out first. Are you head and shoulders above everybody else? Is the high end outcome for you miles and miles away from everybody else within your class? I think that's where you got to start, relative to everybody else around you. And then to kind of peel it back a little bit further, Jam, how far back in years past do I have to go before I say, I would take this person theoretically ahead of you in like a fantasy draft, so to speak, or an expansion draft, or whatever the case may be? Where do you stack up with your peers relative to you? And then where do you stand up in terms of draft classes of years past? That's kind of where I go. And, there's also like the archetypical discussion that we'll get into. Some
Yeah.
positions might be more valuable to you than they are to me. We'll dive into that, I'm sure, as we get into the show. And Jam, the guy that we have to start with, the can't miss prospect of this year's draft. If we were to go back to last year, maybe we would have had a different discussion to open up this podcast in this preseason preview, Jam. We got to start with Darryn Peterson, the guard, the freshman guard, committed to Kansas, listed at about 6'5", 195 pounds, will be 19 years old on draft night. Jam, listen, last year he averaged over 30 points per game, over 7 rebounds, 7 assists, over 2 steals. He was the Naismith High School Player of the Year, a McDonald's All-American, number 1 prospect according to most grassroots ranking outlets. And if you go over, this is no secret, you can go over to the Kansas, official website, go to their men's basketball roster breakdown, and you can read that Darryn Peterson says that he models his games after the likes of a Devin Booker, a Luka Doncic, and a Damian Lillard. I see a lot of those players in his game. So, Jam, let's start with this. I'm immediately reminded of discussions of years past when we're talking about can't miss guards. I remember Scoot Henderson like it was yesterday. I'm a big proponent of physicality being a major prerequisite to NBA translation. I wholeheartedly believe, especially for like a lead initiator, you got to be able to bang with the big boys, right? Scoot Henderson was a player that kind of cleared that line to me, played at the G League Ignite, a program that is no longer in existence. He was a can't miss prospect, and I'm not going to sit here and say he's a bust. It's way too early in his career. I don't even think in the short term he's a bust. He just hasn't lived up to potentially a top 2 prospect within his class expectations so far. The verdict is still open in that regard. And then I remember players like Kennedy Chandler, who I was very high on coming into his draft class, and I remember the ESPN graphic of the next Chris Paul. And then Jam, juxtaposed to those two guys, I remember Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the most recent NBA MVP and NBA champion. I remember Tyrese Halliburton, the lead guard that he played against in the NBA Finals. I remember Amen Thompson coming through the overtime elite. Corey and I sat next to each other and watched him play live. And the overtime elite is not a top tier, or excuse me, he was not considered a top tier prospect in terms of relation to everybody else within his class, and we didn't really know what to do with the overtime elite film. All of those 3 players had big holes in their game when we were talking about them coming into the year. And when you do redrafts within their draft class, these are like the top of their draft classes now. But the aforementioned Kennedy Chandler, I don't even know if he's on an NBA roster right now, Jam. And then again, Scoot Henderson, I think it would be fair to say that he hasn't lived up to a top 2 prospect expectation yet. Where does Darryn Peterson kind of fit into that dialogue, in your opinion, coming into this year?
Yeah, I think he's at the top of the class. A lot of those guys that you named, whether it is someone like Kennedy Chandler, who, to his credit, has seen a really solid pedigree coming out, the quickness, the Chris Paul kind of comps, which I think we all maybe think went just a little bit too far. But he had some concerns, obviously, with the size and a little bit of the
Yep.
shooting as well, too. But I just think for me, Darryn Peterson is a more complete guard and prospect than he gets credit for. Like, honestly, I understand the scoring. Like, how could you not really start with the scoring? How could I not really take the attention? He's a
Right.
multiple level scorer. He's so polished. He's smooth. He'll make you ooh and ah. He keeps defenders on their heels on top of a very projectable frame. With that 6'5" frame, the length, the strength. I believe his reported is 6'10" wingspan. I just love his ability to use that creative and crafty handle, the signature hezzy move that he has to get downhill, to get to his spots. A good pull-up shooter, mid-range shooter, has the floater in his arsenal as well too. On pick and roll threes, on pull-up pick and roll threes, he shot 44% on 27 attempts. So he's giving the versatility there and showing his ability to be able to score at multiple different levels. At the rim, it's both hands, right hand, the left hand, the off hand. I love his willingness not to just be able to be skilled at using the left hand, but his willingness to be able to use
Yes.
the left hand at and around the rim. And in the pick and roll, does his thing as a scorer, but a really underrated playmaker. He can make advanced reads and decisions, some really fun passes, some pocket passes, skip passes. He really processes the game well. And then just to quickly touch on his defense, I mentioned that 6'10" wingspan. It's a
Yep.
part of a really fun defensive tool package that he has with that length, the strength, the quick hands, the fluid lateral quickness. I remember watching one of the games against the Boozers with him, and just in the first half alone, he has an on-ball block, a recovery block. He has a dig steal and scores. He had rotation, verticality. Like, he did a lot of great things defensively just in that first half. And I think with a lot of prospects, especially on the offensive end, who kind of carried that offensive burden. Defensively, you see kind of the consistency and engagement kind of wax and wane, but the defensive tools are there for Peterson. And as I
Mhm.
led off with, he's a much more complete prospect than he's given credit for. It's not just scoring.
Yeah, I think that that's all fair. One of my biggest concerns, Jam, is like, if we're just drinking truth serum right now, it's been a while since Kansas has got a top tier freshman prospect to the degree of a Darryn Peterson. I'm not trying to besmirch the great Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawk legacy there. A lot of people close in my life are big Jayhawk fans. I'm curious to see how he is integrated on this team. I mean, it's like I said, it's been a while since we've seen a hub, like Darryn Peterson come into a program like this. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. I'm glad you gave a great overall breakdown. Some of the things that I noticed, I'm not going to be, redundant in my breakdown on top of yours. I just want to mention some of the things that stand out to me on the offensive end is that he has this wants to utilize his reach and his physicality, vice always wanting to break players down off the dribble. He doesn't want to just sauce people all the time. There's a very mature and poised aspect to Peterson's game that I really appreciate. He's not going to be one of these guys that just like dribbles the air out of the ball. He wants to put his shoulder and create separation. He wants to utilize both hands and his long reach. You mentioned that 6'10" wingspan. That shows up in his his around the basket game, sometimes I feel like sometimes he can get into trouble just like most high school players can with, I'm
Mhm.
just going to get to the paint first and then I'll just kind of figure it out and improv in the paint a little bit later on. So there is a little bit of yin and yang to that. And I do wonder, one of these like natural phenomenons that we see within college basketball, and we see how athletic, strong players, when they translate up, sometimes the finishing numbers aren't necessarily as high as what you would want them to be. I'm curious to see how he adjusts to playing in a stellar conference that Kansas plays in, that night to night competitiveness that he is going to see, how that physicality and that use of length and strength, how that translates up a level. I'm really curious to see that. And I'm glad that you touched on, Jam, the shot off the bounce. I don't think that I would have guessed the percentage was as high as what our friends over at Synergy say that it is within that off of the bounce percentile, because when I see it and I look at the shot mechanics and how I think that, obviously the competition is going to increase as he goes to Kansas, that's kind of one of my bigger concerns, Jam. And I think I'm going to bounce this back to you with the focus on star players. I think sometimes we just talk about like their shot off the catch and how that can translate up. I kind of want to focus on throughout the year. I just want to see if I can tell, like, the shot off the bounce is so prominent if you're going to be an offensive engine. Do you think that that's going to be kind of like if he does well, that's going to be the reason why he's drafted so high? Or if he does poor, is that going to give enough room for like maybe two of the other guys that we're talking about here in a little bit? Maybe that's why they might rise up to the number one spot if it happens at all.
I really don't see him being a poor shooter off the bounce, and even if the numbers don't end up looking great at Kansas, I just really trust what he's already shown, and I think will continue to show at Kansas, which is that blend of pure shooting and shot making. I think there's always going to be enough of that shot making versatility and that from different spots on the floor to where he has to be respected, where they aren't going to leave him open. You can't go under with him. Yes, he has some things to clean up, but I'm really just buying the whole package there. And I actually see generational hater in the chat there asking some really good things, and that's
I
a
was going
great
to take it there.
question. Yeah,
I'm glad that you're segueing naturally right into this for sure.
yes, I was talking a little bit about it and pass that on over to you. But for me, it's all the above that you mentioned, generational hater. So he can play in the pockets, the quick read in the pocket pass, is reading the low man out of the pick and roll, like when he's drawing doubles and triples as well too. He's being able to make the touch lob pass. He really has most of the type of passes that you will like, those advanced reads and passes. I think it'll be very interesting if he continues to operate as a point guard, but either way, he's going to be a lead guard in this day and age in this modern game, as you should. If you're going to be a lead guard, lead wing, lead anything, and that primary initiator, you're going to have to be able to pass the ball as well, too. You can't just score. You're going to have to be able to make sound decisions.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I'm glad that you took it there. Generational hater, just to kind of take it back to his comment, ask, how is Peterson's passing, specifically the reads that he makes, the accuracy and the timing? Does he develop chemistry with teammates or primarily score in ISO? I think that was one of the biggest aspects of his game, Jam, that I really wanted to dive into in my film study. And the way that I take my preseason notes, like if anyone tried to like hack my Gmail stuff and like read this, like I feel bad that they would want to read my notes because I'm a little all over the place, but it makes sense in my head. And I kind of take notes in real time. So
Mm-hmm.
as I'm assessing his playmaking, it starts with can make some very difficult reads, puts real zip on his passes. And then I'm telling myself, okay, very good feel and vision. And I'm capitalizing the word very. Can really force an issue, but it comes from confidence, not and getting it right more times than he gets it wrong. Can drive and get his man to be in some tough places to make dynamic passes. So I really buy into that. I do worry about, can he slow down as a driver and play at multiple speeds? I would really want to see him improve his decel game, because if we look at guys like Shea and Luka, players like that who are going to be offensive hubs, it's not so much athleticism isn't always, Jam, as you know, the stopping speed, but also like the
Mm-hmm.
stopping speed. Can you control your body while also simultaneously shielding the defender away from the ball to where you can make the appropriate read and just really keep the defense on ice skates, man. I think that that's going to be a big portion of, is he going to be an offensive engine or is he just going to be a natural scorer? And I think too, Jam, I would love to just kind of talk philosophy with you on this. I'm shotgunning you a little bit here. 6'5", that's like a teetering height listing, right? Like that's like around the James Harden. He's a 2, but really functions a lot as a point guard. We saw him just kind of naturally take over as he's aged, being a lead playmaker, but he was an off guard a lot as well. What do you think kind of the archetypical NBA casting is going to be for him in his immediacy? Just right now, we're making some bold proclamations right now in the preseason, but that's why we do this. How do you think that archetypically he enters in the NBA based on what you've seen in his high school film?
Yeah, I think he's going to be at the 2, and you want to always have multiple ball handlers, multiple initiators. So he's going to be that lead guard. I think you can be versatile with him, which is great. I think he's going to play a good amount of point guard, but ultimately he'll settle into that 2. So you can play him next to a more traditional point guard. We'll see what the size looks like, but I'm not concerned about it. I think he looks legitimate, 6'5". The length is there. He already has some mature muscle to his frame. He's getting cut up. I think he is going to continue to add some really, really legitimate grown man muscle to his frame. And I'm not really concerned about that at all for me. I guess my thing with him, that you did mention, I actually do like the pace and
Okay.
everything, and it's been a change in direction. I think that's a strong part of his game, but I just don't know what that top speed is for him and like what that exactly looks like. He may not need that top speed, if it's not that effective in general, but I do want to see what that top speed does look like and his ability to go from there to, like you were saying, shifting gears. But I do like the pace and the creativity that he does have with the ball.
And I think the height that he has, what NBA teams are going to be so drawn to that in the short term as well as the long term. But when you have the length that he has and the height of eye advantage that he is going to have as a creator, hopefully with the ball, is that he's got an advantage that you're just not going to be able to have. It's like a quarterback, this NFL season kicking off, preseason and all that. We'll keep it in football. College football has kicked off very recently. Quarterbacks that can't see over the center, they're relegated to playing out of the shotgun a lot, and you could be a Drew Brees and spend all your time in the shotgun and be one of the best ever, but the path to being able to do that, very, very small. Whereas if you're a little bit taller, you can kind of play under the center. You can still read the defense and all of those things. In a lot of ways, that same philosophy translates over to your lead initiator. If you can see over the top of the defense, you can layer those passes, another football term. We're versatile here. If you can layer those passes on a basketball floor and just kind of have different passing and throwing angles as an initiator, that's going to help you out a lot. And that gives you a lot more leniency in terms of the type of player you have to be because of your physical stature. Do you kind of agree with that philosophy there, Jam?
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Okay, right on. So I want to tag on the defense just a little bit more because, Jam, the more that I do this, I hate to phrase it this way, but certain players are just going to get a pass on defense from me,
Rightfully so.
not just because of their role on the offensive end, but Jam, I don't know how many times we talk about NBA players when they get to the league. They're like, well, the defense came out of nowhere. Maxwell, one of his favorite ones, Jalen Wells, coming the recent Memphis Grizzly. And we were like, well, there's certain aspects of his defense that were good, but is he going to be a good team defender? How does he do in recovery and stuff like that? I don't know how many times, Jam, we look at a player and sometimes it's going to come down to, give a crap for lack of a better word. But do they have the physical tools to be able to, if they do give a crap, be an impactful and a difference maker on the defensive end? And I'll tell you, like, some of my notes on defense. First one, obvious tools to have a defensive impact. That's the very first thing that I have written down. He moves his feet well, can get vertical. And again, by vertical, I don't mean necessarily jumping up, but playing big, presenting and showing himself large, getting his chest into his man, and being an obstacle that they kind of have to overcome in some respect. Asked to defend up the lineup on defense a lot. That's something that I noticed in his film because of his size. You're going to play, high school coaches are going to do what they think is best, and sometimes that's matching size versus size, right? But here's where I get a little bit concerned. He can get lazy, slipping under screens, and playing just screen navigation at times just leaves a lot to be desired. Can be a little sloppy on the second side rotations when he is in those help side states, but he does have those moments where you're talking about where he's playing against the Boozers to where he can make a highlight play, but it's not consistent a lot. I write good recovery tools need to come more poised on up fakes, not just biting on the first attempt from his man. But I also write makes great and timely digs at the ball during gathers and when players are getting into their shots. So in that kind of little blend of different notes there, both good and bad, Jam, do any of those stand out as stuff that you saw? And do all of those things just kind of come down to effort?
Yeah, I saw a lot of what you saw in film as well, and we are on the same page with this. And I think a lot of battlers I would imagine that I've talked to, and just the consensus probably on the same page with this as well too. We know that you're going to get a little bit of a pass defensive when you are that offensive engine. You want to see that they have tools and a want to, even if it's not consistent. That's going to be up to them and the coaching on the NBA level to kind of get that out. And you talked about Maxwell and Jalen Wells. That's a great example. And we just have so many examples where guys have tools that get to the NBA and they turn it on more than they ever have. Anthony Edwards is a prime example, a top
Good one.
prospect. Just those tremendous tools, as we know, top 1% athlete, the strength, the length, the quick twitch athleticism, the competitive nature. He's even come out and said, yeah, I didn't really have to play defense until I got to the NBA, and you see that competitor that he is. So that's the type of stuff you want to look at. You can go and talk about Jalen McDaniels,
Another
give
good one,
credit
yeah.
to him. He was a top 5, top 10 guy coming out of high school, played with the ball in his hands in high school and at Washington, and give him credit, his team credit. He had all the defensive tools, but that really just was not what his projected path were to be. But once you got there and you figured out what the plan was for you, need to not only stick but to excel. So you see him find a role with Minnesota 3-and-D, and he's working himself to more offensive reps. He's a 3-and-D plus guy. And then just throw out one more example because I think these are important. Aaron Nesmith, shooter coming out of Vanderbilt.
Yep.
Defensive tools were there with the length. He had a really good, strong frame, but that's not really what the calling card was. It was like he has to really shoot. And I think we only got maybe a 10-game sample. Don't quote me, but it was a small sample before he was hurt. But so we do have these guys who have the defensive tools. Just comes down to, as you said, the want-to and the coaching staff. And I think that's the case is going to be with Peterson. The tools are there. I think the want-to is mostly there, what you can for college and everything, and being that offensive engine, as you mentioned. But I think once he gets to the NBA level, I'm not looking for him to be a shutdown guy, but I think he'll have some versatility, can get some stops when needed one-on-one, and he can be a playmaker defensively. And I think that's incredibly important considering the offensive burden that he's going to carry.
And I think too, and we're going to talk about a couple of different guys who play very different positions than Peterson. Do you necessarily have to have a defensive ace at the 1 or the 2 in today's NBA? As long as you have the back line down and you have guys who can be reliable, give maximum effort when they're on the ball, funnel the guy to the big man who's going to reject shots, depending on the team that he goes to, I think that you might be able to live with a little bit of a risk taker if that's ultimately what Darryn Peterson's defensive role ends up being at the next level. But Jam, that's going to do it for our breakdown on Darryn Peterson. We're going to hit this quick break, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite players in this draft class, in Cam Boozer. Hang tight. We'll be right back. All right, we are back here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show. We are the Draft Sickos, your host, Stephen Gillaspie, and my co-host, Jam Hines. Jam, we're going to talk about now Cam Boozer, son of Carlos Boozer, who longtime NBA vet, played for the Jazz and the Bulls prominently throughout his NBA career. His son going to his old man school, going to Duke to be a forward big man, listed at about 6'9", 250 pounds. He will also be 19 years old. Last year, he averaged over 22 points, almost 12 boards, over 3 assists, almost 2 steals, a block and a half per game on shooting splits of 61, 47, 81. That's crazy. The 2025 Gatorade Player of the Year, a McDonald's All-American, and the co-MVP of the All-American game. 4 straight state championships, Jam, and the 2025 Chipotle national title. He was the 2025 Hoop Hall Classic MVP. He is a 2-time gold medalist already. Part of Peach Jam history to be the first team to sweep the 15, 16, and 17U levels of Peach Jam. Jam, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy accolades, crazy stat line. He's got the lineage, the NBA lineage going on in his blood. People are going to geek out. People like me, I'm not throwing shade, I'll geek out over, having NBA bloodlines. I think that gives you a certain advantage. I don't know if it's marginal or a huge one, but it's certainly something. Jam, before we dive into the breakdown just of his game, I want to ask you a couple questions about him before we do that. The first one is going to be, I think the archetype for him is going to be so interesting to watch. And I think how he plays at Duke is going to do wonders for him in terms of his NBA projection, how NBA teams are going to see him as a player. I have him listed as like a kind of a pivot between a forward and a big man. I think that he could really play. Jim, if you remember, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, when like Dirk was getting going with the Dallas Mavericks, a lot of people might not remember this, but he actually played the 3 whenever he first came into the league. And I could see Cam giving you a little bit of that Lowry Markkanen type 3-4-5 positional value. What do you kind of have him categorized at as a player coming into the year?
I do have him categorized as a big wing, and essentially, like, that's really optimizes at the 4. Someone that can really play the 4 and 5, get to the 3 when we really need to. We'll get kind of into the nitty-gritty of his game, but the ball skills will have to continue to take another step forward, that handle for him to give real consistent minutes at the 3. But like how you mentioned how Larry Marketing, or even like when the Cavs were, they're 2 different players, but as far as like giving that kind of lineup, but when they use Dean Wade at the 3 sometimes as well too, it's a guy who's not really a 3, is probably better at that 4, even the 5, but doesn't quite have that ball skills for the 3. But I do trust Cam's ball skills more than both of them. But yeah, that's kind of where I see him at, at that 4 or 5, that big wing spot, being able to space the floor, perimeter oriented, play in and out.
Okay. Yeah. And I think that you and I were kind of seeing the same thing. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, Jam, is our beloved brothers here at the No Ceilings, conglomerate that we are. There's been a lot of heat recently on player comparisons. I think that the Tylers and Corey and Albert are kind of having this kind of like little kayfabe beef going on between the 2 of them for all you wrestling fans out there. On
don't turn it into a shoot.
It's always a shoot, brother. That's what we're here for. There's a little bit of a shoot going on between those 2 guys. It might be a work. As to the level of type of player that we should be comparing these prospects specifically in this class to, I've already heard Cam Boozer get the Tim Duncan comparisons, the Darryn Peterson, the aforementioned Darryn Peterson that we talked about just moments ago on the show, getting some Kobe Bryant comparisons. Those are big comps. And instead of talking about whether those guys are right or wrong, because I don't think that we're going to change any minds here, I want to try my hand at a comparison here with Cam Boozer, if you'll let me, Jam.
Absolutely. I love comps. Always here for it.
All right. So my comp for Cam Boozer is a legend. Now, it's not the tippy top Mount Rushmore of a legend, but he's a legend nonetheless. I look at Cam Boozer, and his game reminds me a lot of the Detroit Pistons bad boys, Rasheed Wallace. And I know some people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, Cam Boozer like the nicest kid. That's why he gets these Tim Duncan comparisons, because it's very much like the next play mentality. And I agree that in terms of demeanor, he's probably closer to a Tim Duncan than he is a Rasheed Wallace. But if we look at the style of play, though, if we look at where the buckets are coming from, we look at like the versatility on both ends of the floor, not just scoring and protecting the basket and being a great defender, but a little bit of creation ability with the ball, the ability to find the open man, not just off of a pickup off the bounce and make a play. I see a lot of Rasheed Wallace in Cam Boozer, and I know that that's UNC Duke cross comparison. That might be a bad thing as well. But Jam, what do you think of Cam's comparison to Rasheed Wallace?
I really do like that as a part of this comp blend. You look at both guys, their ability to play inside out, stretch the floor, play out of the post, low post, mid post, elbows as well too, and be able to offer some some weak side rim protection as well too. So I do really like that comparison. I think Corey also said something very similar as far as comparisons go, and I'm right there with him and always believe this. You should be, or at least, feel justified in comparing a top prospect like this, to a Hall of Famer, multiple time and perennial all-star, those type of talents, especially when the pedigree is right there with it and it aligns, and then also those foundational skills and traits. You have to have that overlap in that. You can't just compare somebody who's a non-shooter to a shooter, and those type of things. That doesn't make any sense. So with something like this, I think you're spot on with that.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, like we're talking about these guys as can't miss prospects within the 2026 NBA draft class. You wouldn't want to miss on the second coming of a Rasheed Wallace type player with the demeanor and accolades and just next play mentality, the teammate chemistry of a Tim Duncan. I think that's the type of player I'm here for, Jam, I know that you are as well. And just for anyone who's wondering, the breakdown and the order that we're doing this is very much where Jam and I have these guys on our big board. We both have DP number 1. I have him in a standalone tier right now. But tier 2, I have Cam Boozer, and we'll talk about the game now. So Jam, when I'm looking at him, I just see he's a big body on the floor. He's listed at 6'9". I wouldn't be surprised if he's closer to that 6'10". I don't know if he's continuing to grow or not. It's crazy when we watch these prospects and how they continue to grow. I remember Jason Tatum still growing in the NBA. Yeah. And I think that we could very much see that with Cam Boozer, who's also playing with his brother Caden Boozer at Duke, by the way. And I like Caden a lot. We'll talk about him probably next week. But I look at how huge Cam is. I think that he's very comfortable when he is attacking the basket. He doesn't do it a lot. He's not going to be in that Paolo Banchero mold in terms of, I would say, volume of attacking the basket, but he's comfortable in doing it. I think that he spaces the floor very well, even though the shot probably needs some cleaning up in some regard. He's still comfortable taking it and shot very well in high school. I think he can do some tough work in the paint and handling contact. Some of his shots are impacted by the amount of contact that he draws, but I think that's going to translate great in terms of getting to the free throw line. He protects the ball well with his body. I think that he plays the ball high in the paint a lot, so he's not subjected to turnovers and stuff like that from just not protecting the ball. He is he treats the ball like it's valuable, and I love that. Takes long 3-point shots, not just taking threes, but he takes deep threes too, and he's comfortable in doing that. I think he's a great grab and go option. He is comfortable working off of screens from his other teammates. I look at a lot of flex cuts that I saw when he was with Columbus as well. I just think there's so much dynamism to his offensive game and versatility, Jam. Where do you kind of see that offense and how it's going to contribute to his whole holistic draft value?
Man, I agree a lot. The evaluation that you put on Boozer, very spot on. For me, he's a machine, a cyborg.
Yes.
The efficiency it's just so crazy. A lot of times when you're watching his games and you don't even know what the line looks like, it's like, oh, he had a solid game. You felt his impact on both ends. He scored, he did this, the stocks were there. And you look up into the game and he has 20, 10, and like three stocks. And it's just like, oh, really?
He did
And
all that?
so
Yeah.
yeah, so he can quietly do some of this, I think, which is incredible considering his efficiency. And for me, I really just love the profile, as you really mentioned, the size, combination of size, feel, skill, two-way upside, NBA bloodlines. I'm a huge NBA bloodlines believer.
Mhm.
That's something I really do value a lot. Just be able to understand and grow up in a household with a professional athlete of that magnitude, to be able to understand what it takes to be successful on and off the floor, what that travel lifestyle is like, the impact that it has on the family, what you have to do to take care of your body. It's just so many different things I think that can help give you a leg up on the competition when you do have those close bloodlines. But the inside outside game, as we mentioned earlier, his ability to play with power and finesse, the
Mm.
footwork is incredible. The low and mid post, he can operate as a scorer and a passer. I'm very intrigued to see, and I want to see how they utilize him at Duke. I know he'll do a lot of DHO stuff. I wonder how much pick and roll stuff he'll handle
Yeah.
as a handler, to see if he can continue to tap in that type of stuff and use some of the skill, some of the passing flashes that he has shown. We'll get into AJ as well, of course, after this, but I don't think his passing upside, especially with the live dribble pick and roll, is to the caliber of AJ or Darryn. But I do think there's a good amount of feel and vision there for him to be able to capitalize and be a really sound decision maker and passer. And then out of the short roll, I really want to see him continue to operate that as the role man. I think there's a lot that he really can do with this touch, the power, the size, and everything there. And I'm glad that you brought up the shooting. I know there's still a little bit of concern, but for someone that shot 40 previous synergy, 40%
Yeah.
from three on 115 three-point attempts, there shouldn't be that much concern. I understand that the shot may not be everyone's cup of tea, but really, it doesn't bother me at all. I know it's a little mechanical, but I like how fluid it is pretty much overall. It's compact. He gets his feet set. I know the high arc can be a little much at times, but I do like what he's doing consistently. And as I mentioned, the numbers back it up. He shot 46.7% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. That's on 30 attempts. So I'm not really worried about him not being a respectable shooter out there. Is he going to shoot 40%? Probably not. We'll see. But it's going to be enough for it to be a weapon for him to attack closeouts and to do everything that he needs to do. And I'm glad you brought up also the rebounding. Like, he rebounds in and out of his area, and that
Yes.
links right up to that grab and go ability, which I think is going to be huge for him to be able to continue to play and get out of transition as a finisher and as a handler too.
I think that the rebounding is so key for him too. I mean, if there's one thing that we've noticed over time, Jam, it's like how translatable certain aspects of the game are over others. Rebound is typically one of those things where, like, if you're a good rebounder in high school, that typically translates to college, which
Yes.
again translates up to the NBA. I wholeheartedly buy the rebounding, and I also love the fact that Duke is going to be such a weird kind of like melting pot, so to speak, of different archetypes this year, to where I'm curious because they're going to be huge, man. I mean, they got Sar coming in, Nick Kaminia, who I'm a big fan of. They got Nyongba there as well. There's some big bodies there, and I'm curious to see how Boozer is utilized. And I'm glad that you touched on the playmaking as well, because he did average over 3 assists, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's got bad vision or anything like that. I just would love to see him utilized more as a DHO guy as opposed to a
Hmm.
hub. I think that there are going to be, for obvious reasons, there are going to be some comparisons to a player like Paulo Banchero. And I think Paulo is just such a more confident playmaker off of the live feed as opposed to Boozer, where I think he's more confident. Let me 1-2 dribble make a decision, or let me kind of turn my back to the basket and operate as a pass out of the mid post, high post, elbow extended playmaker in that manner. I don't know if I necessarily buy him as a playmaker off of the bounce, which
Yeah.
does limit him to some degree, but I don't think it's necessarily going to impact his high end stock, because he can do so many other things, create from so many different areas of the floor. I like him as a trail option too in transition. I think that that could be a fun look for him. I think that he's going to be an effective screener because of the big frame and the want to, and just the attention to detail and his ability to do all the kind of like unsexy things that a big man has to do in basketball to
Hmm.
be effective. You're going to get that buy-in from Boozer, and he's getting great advice from his dad, who did all the dirty work things. And I mean, in the NBA too, Cam has his dad, Carlos, who was just like a post machine in the
Yes.
NBA for such a long time. And you can see where he is getting some of that DNA handed down to him over time. What I love about him the most, though, Jam, is just this is where the Rasheed Wallace and Tim Duncan comparisons, I think, pop into your head, because he's going to be an effective offensive player and he's so intelligent. But if you watch him play defense, like, you were going to look at him and be like, oh my gosh, like, he is going to have such a high level of value and make such an immediate impact in the league, because he is just everywhere all at once on the defensive end, Jam.
He really is, and just really blending that and leveraging that mix of size, length, timing, and mobility. I think he's going to be a really reliable weak side rim protector. Don't see him as like this guy who's going to really anchor the back line of the defense, but you have someone that can block shots at the rim. And
Yep.
with his size, I'm looking for him to utilize those physical tools to be a defensive playmaker, a switchable defensive playmaker. And I think at worst, that is something that he can bring on a night in and night out basis, even if he's not, a shutdown type of guy. I'm very interested to see if he can eventually kind of defend some of those star wings, whether if it's
Yep.
like a Tatum or, Kawhi, Giannis, to see what that exactly looks like. So I'm very curious what type of matchups you'll kind of see in the ACC and then their non-conference schedule to see what exactly he can do against. Obviously, there's no one like that at the NBA level, but excuse me, at the college level,
Right.
but who has those type of NBA tools that can kind of challenge him. So I'm really looking forward to see just exactly how switchable he can be, what the defense truly is look like as an on-ball defender. But ultimately, as I said, like, I think it's gonna be more than enough for him to be a switchable defender that makes guys work and a defensive playmaker out of it. I do worry a little bit how much he can really defend the space against
Mm,
ones, other
yeah.
point guards, because he is mobile. The recovery tools are there, but he doesn't exactly flip his hips that fluidly, so that's kind of a concern. But overall, I do like that defensive package that he's bringing to the table.
I love it. I put in my notes that he's not bad at defending out in space, but that's going to be
Hmm.
one of those areas to where I think that's going to be kind of like the telltale as to like what's the high end outcome level that he brings on the defensive end. I like his closeout technique. He makes
Yeah.
those short steps, defends to the side as to not just tackle the guy after he releases the ball and shoots it. I love his approach on that. Moves his feet well and gets low on his man. The way that I kind of think about this in my head, and it's kind of counterintuitive, because when we talk about offense, we say, they just take what the defense gives them. I think Cam, in a lot of the same ways as a defender, he takes what the offense gives him. Like, he is
Hmm.
very, when I say conservative as a defender, I don't mean that like he is relaxed or anything like that. Like, he brings a lot of intensity, but he is not going to be like the gambling man on the
Yep.
defensive end. He is very reserved. He is going to make you prove to him that the possession that you're about to have is like a high volume one. He doesn't jump at everything, but still at the same time, even though he's not like one of these like jump at a pump fake guys, he still has great timing when he goes up to contest the shot and blocks the shot at a high rate. I love his instincts when he is like locked on man, defensively. I do think that the rotations need to be more consistent. That might be like an offensive role or maybe just a young player thing. But again, show smart hands at times. And I do like the positional versatility that the high end version of him figures to be at the next level, Jam. So we got one more player that we're going to talk about here out of these big three. You guys probably already know who it is, but I'm still going to do the podcast thing and make you wait for me to say the name on the other end of this break. All right, so the mystery guy that we're going to be talking about out of the big three of the 2026 NBA draft class here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show with your draft sickos here is the former number one prospect of his respective class, Jam. We know that he's playing at BYU this year, kind of a do-it-all offensive player, and I think that's what the value of a guy like AJ Dybantsa. There's the name. You're welcome. AJ Dybantsa brings you a lot of offensive versatility, and that's the name of the game in today's NBA Jam is how valuable can you be on the offensive end? And I think that when you look at AJ, 6'6", 215 pounds, already like pretty close to, if not already, an NBA frame. Another one of these guys that are going to be 19 years old whenever the draft comes around, averaged almost 22 points, a lot of rebounds, Jam. I think these numbers might be fake, but I'm going to say it anyway. Almost 13 rebounds, over 3 assists, a steal and a half a game, 1 block per game, shooting splits of 46, 41, and 69 from the line. McDonald's All-American, was part of the 2026 high school class, but reclassified to the 2025 class. Gatorade Player of the Year in Massachusetts during the 2022-2023 season. Led Peach Jam in scoring with almost 26 points per game, Jam, in the summer of 2023. Another one of these two-time gold medalists. Most recently, not that he's at fault of this, but the decision to name him the FIBA U19 World Cup MVP was a little bit polarizing. And Jam, I think if you were just to look at the offense that AJ brought to the table, you would say, yeah, I could get with the little bit of criticism. But what has kind of caught a lot of people off guard, and Metcalf recently did a great job of the breakdown here on the YouTube channel as to diving into this, is that Dybantsa has turned into a little bit of a defensive stalwart as this season is about to kick off, Jam. What did you think of just that dialogue around AJ Dybantsa being named the MVP? Let's start off with that.
Yeah, I think it was controversial to say the least, but I think the most important thing there is, he and the other young guys brought home the gold. But I do believe he did play with a lot of versatility there. And as you mentioned with Metcalf in the breakdown, like even he showed that FIBA and throughout his high school tenure, just those incredible defensive tools and what he can do. He's so rangy, he's long, like you see the mature muscle on his frame as well. The quick twitch athleticism is there too. When he wants to get down, he can show his fluidity, flipping his hips and covering a lot of ground laterally as well. So there is just a lot to like about him as well. And at the point of attack as well, I think with the quick hands that he's shown, he can be a menace there in that type of length. I want to see how BYU really deploys him defensively. Is he going to be defending multiple positions? Obviously, can switch. So I'm just very curious to see how they kind of unleash him defensively and how that really affects what he does on the offensive end. And as we talked about FIBA. I got FIFA on my mind. I was playing FIFA earlier today. But
you got sick to basketball. That's the only thing that we care about, Jam. Come on, get it together.
At FIBA U19s, he shot 11.1% from 3, 2 of 18. So I get the concerns to an extent, especially when that is your most recent showing, kind of the last taste you're putting in people's mouth before they see you again on a collegiate level and such a big stage like that. But overall, I love the elevation on his jumper. It's smooth. He's comfortable. I really do think that from to shoot that bad is sort of a one-off to an extent. I don't think he is necessarily a great shooter, but I think he's a great shot maker. So he kind of
Mm.
has that requisite level of shooting and shot making versatility that I'm always looking for, especially, at that size. And I don't think the numbers really were that bad percentage. He shot 35.2% from three percentage, 40% on 35 unguarded catch and shoot threes. So I think there is still a lot to really work with and like about for him as a shooter, and not to really sound the alarm bells and panic right now about that.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot there, Jam. A fantastic breakdown. I like, the high shot release. I love his handle. Good lift on his jumper. Kind of a two motion shooting form, and the release is a little
Hmm.
for the shoulder. Gets the ball poked, out of his handle kind of more often than I would like to see. Knows how to shift gears though. Kind of the questions about Peterson that I was talking about earlier. I love that AJ can play at multiple speeds. Obviously, the length that he has is like just phenomenal. Can tack either
Yes.
side on his drive when he pulls up. I feel like he does, however, need to clean up his body control. He kind of flails a bit much whenever he's getting his shot off of the bounce. Will shoot from deep range. Still needs to work on finishing with contact on like the non dunks. I think it's more of a balance thing, and that kind of talks about like the shot off motion, and I think too the non-dunk finishes. I don't know. Like he's got good measurables. I don't know how good his core strength is because I feel like if
Mm.
he could get that really, really kind of tight and squared away, the shooting off emotion is going to come and be so much more lethal than it already has been in his young career. I think that he kind of arches his, away from contact when he is kind of shooting over contact, which really takes away his shooting power and base. I think he is so, I hate to say contact averse already because I want to see him play college, but I think that he cares so much about, and this sounds stupid, like he cares so much about making every shot that I don't think that he's necessarily worried enough about getting to the free throw line and just absorbing contact, if that makes sense. I think that he wants literally every shot to find the bottom of the rim and not rely on going to the free throw line. So kind of something that I'm noticing there. But I think that he does finish off of cuts and lobs very well. I do like his, again, I'm noting his handle a lot in my notes. And I do think that he keeps the ball high in traffic, so he's not going to be turnover prone whenever he is in a congested area. He does have good, interesting improvisational skills on the offensive end. And I think that a question that I ask in the chat, just to kind of let people behind the curtain, so to speak, here, Jam, is one question I asked our group chat is who do we think is going to be the most polarizing player within this
Hmm.
draft class for our team? I wholeheartedly think it's going to be AJ Dybantsa. I think AJ is going to be one of the more polarizing guys, just based off of he's already kind of polarizing coming in. Jam, he was the number one player within his draft class last year. We expected him to be the top dog in this year's class, and over the past year, for various reasons, we've all kind of reported on this. He just hasn't like had the type of killer instinct to hold on to that mantle coming into this year. Do you think that there's any sort of validity into my thoughts that he might be the most polarizing coming into the year?
Yeah, I think there's definitely is some validity, especially when you talk about someone that was almost consensus number one pick coming
Yeah.
into the class, and then it kind of dropped a little bit. I don't want to say necessarily that is all in him. Like I think to an extent he's stagnated for whatever those reasons are, but I think you still have to maybe give just more credit to the machine-like nature that I mentioned from Cam Boozer and just his scroll of accomplishments and everything that he done on the high school and grassroots level, and then Darryn Peterson's continued ascension of he continues to take the next step in his game. So I think it's kind of a more so those things, and I think AJ feels and should believe that he is right there. I think he's going to be right on track to continue to find his footing and to kind of to really excel back into that first pick spot because he is the most naturally gifted and talented player in this class, in my opinion, especially with all those tools and the handle and the shot making ability to be able to hit and get star making type of shots. And what he does getting downhill, I think that's when he's at his best,
Mm,
slashing, getting
yeah.
downhill, getting to the pull up game. And I'm curious to get your thoughts about the whole foul stuff because I think it's just a tad bit overblown about him flailing. I think that he can. And I know it's annoying, like obviously,
Yeah.
but I do think that I don't think it's as big of a concern that is made out to be. Sometimes he does have to do a better job of using his frame and his strength to play through contact because he does it sometimes. He just has to
Yeah.
find that consistently. And I think that just comes with more reps, more experience, and just more maturity, as you continue to play basketball and grow into your frame and realize how to use everything that you have. And I think he, shot just under maybe 8 free throws, so 7 free throws per game. So he's still getting to the line. And I think he's doing a good job there as well. So you think he's kind of free throw grifting a little bit too much, or what's kind of like your take on that?
I I don't have a problem with it. This is a
Okay.
conversation that I had with Blake Harper for my interview that I did with him a few weeks back. I don't mind the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, draw free
Hmm.
throw, like draw contact, get to the free throw line. I just want him to lean if he's gonna do it, like don't be afraid of the contact that you're gonna draw. Like that's kind of
Yeah,
like what I was like trying to illustrate earlier is
got
that
you.
I think that he could do it even more if he wanted to, and I would be okay with him leaning into that. Like I'm not one of those old heads that think that it's just, you have to do it. Like if you don't do it,
It's
you're
a
not going to be
skill.
valuable in
Yeah.
today's NBA. Like if you're going to be the lead scorer, because I think that he's got the handle, he's got great rip throughs, euros, and hop steps to where that he can get to and finish. I love the stuff that he can do off of the gather. I think that he covers a lot of ground on the offensive end. It's just that I
Hmm.
think that he tries to lean so far away from contact too often that I think that that messes up the efficiency that he could have at either finishing or getting to the free throw line. Like that's what I would love to see him do more is utilizing, like you mentioned, that NBA size that he already has, draw the contact. And if you miss the shot, don't get the and one, just go take your two at the line, brother. Like that's what I
Yep.
would love to see him focus on. And Jam, I want to kind of take this time to transition now to the playmaking. And we were talking about NBA comparisons. We've said, how Cam Booster is getting the Tim Duncan, Darryn Peterson is getting the Kobe Bryant. I mean, anybody who's listened to anybody talk about Darryn Peterson, I think that Tracy McGrady is like the name that you hear the most in terms
Hmm.
of comparison. And that's because he's a tall playmaker. He looks so aesthetically pleasing with the ball in his hand, and
Yeah.
I think that the passing, I mean, he keeps his handle low. Sometimes I think it gets a little too wide for him. I would love to see him kind of be a little bit tighter with that low handle, but nice live dribble passes on the moves, can get himself into crowds and lose the ball a little bit. But I do feel like he can find the open man at a high level. Um, I would love to see him not necessarily always hunt the home run pass, like
Hmm.
the assist pass instead of like the next to the right pass. But I think that with such kind of creativity that he's already shown at the high school level, when he gets to BYU and he's playing with Richie Saunders, who is just cash money from outside, or he's playing next to Rob Wright, who is going to set him up as well. I think that when he gets more sophisticated, like next level coaching, the stuff that he brings to the table as a ball handler and a passer, I think that if he's going to reclaim the number one spot within this class, Jam, I think it's going to be in terms of how dynamic is he going to be as a scorer, playmaker. What's that ratio going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, with him, I think his playmaking and his processing, I think it's going to surprise some people, whether it's
Yeah.
casual people or some that just were more locked in on his scoring package and kind of the narrative about him stagnating. But yeah, I think the playmaking is absolutely there. I don't know if he's going to be best kind of like a secondary playmaker, but for someone obviously for him to live up to what his highest upside can be, he's gonna have the ball in his hands. And once again, we talked about that earlier, where it's like if you're playing with the ball in your hands a lot, you have to be a sound decision maker and passer. You don't have to be great, but you have to be sound considering
Yeah.
how much usage you're going to have, how much you're going to be dictating as the lead initiator. But yeah, he can make a lot of fun passes from the hook passes, some skip passes, the live dribble stuff is a lot of fun. And I just really want to see him continue to take on that challenge of being a facilitator at times, being able to continuously get your teammates involved with something that I think
Mhm.
he can do. And all that's really going to do is continue to elevate his game, elevate both his floor and his ceiling. So I'm right. I'm really looking forward to see what that BYU team looks like. You know, they're going to play the NBA style. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for him to make those NBA type of plays and reads. So I think that playmaking aspect is going to be a very surprising aspect for a lot of people about AJ's game.
I wholeheartedly agree, man. And let's talk about the defense real quick. And it's funny because when I did my film dive, this was before the FIBA stuff. So some of these questions that I had, I feel like he's answered some of them. But
Hmm.
listen, if we're going to talk about sample size with the offense and how the 3-point percentage isn't what you want to see, you want to we want to be a little bit more optimistic that he can kind of prove us wrong, that sample size is just inadequate and he's a better shooter. Maybe we need to kind of do a little bit more glass half empty approach to the defense. Like, I hate to be that guy, but I want to see him kind of show it at the collegiate level, because
Yeah.
FIBA style of play is just different than what we do in America, like on a night to night basis, right? So on the defensive end, I wrote, he can, when he gets behind the play, I feel like he stays behind defensively is something that I noticed. Does have quick hands to create defensive events if he does stay in front of his man, though. So kind of what we saw him do in FIBA, I felt like he did answer that a little bit more.
Mhm.
Does tend to overcommit though on his recovery. So if he is in a recovery state to where he does come back, he is going to flat out sell out and not necessarily have like the fundamental approach. His team did play zone a little too much to really kind of, I would say, like adequately dive into what his defensive tendencies on the ball were necessarily going to be. But I don't know if that was a skill thing or a scheme thing. And
Yeah.
the last thing that I have on the defense, and it felt like he kind of answered this in FIBA, was would really need him to buy into the fundamentals on defense a lot more for his NBA projection to be a lot cleaner. Did you have any of those same kind of takeaways when you were watching his high school film?
I did. And then for me, sometimes it's hard to kind of, I'm not sure if separates the right word or maybe I'm giving too much credence because I'm very much just like if you show me the tools and that you can do it, all right, bet I'm good. Like I know
Yeah.
that you can do it. I know it's in the arsenal and I understand what it is in high school and what it can kind of be through your collegiate journey. But if the tools are there when you get to the NBA, when we need you to defend, when you need you to understand how to defend rotations and, thinking that way as well, too, as long as the physical tools. I'm just counting on for it to come out at the NBA. Maybe that can bite me again, but we've seen too many examples of guys being able to develop. And you mentioned Jason Tatum early. He's
Yep.
another guy, defensive tools, but he was on the offensive and in college. That really wasn't what he needed to do. There wasn't much talk about him being like a really versatile defender, but the tools were there, and he's been able to form a really fun defensive tandem on the wings with Jaylen Brown. So yeah, all the tools are there, and as I mentioned, it's just about making sure they find some consistency on the NBA level. Hopefully, that consistency takes a bump up a little bit at BYU, and just that competitive nature comes out with all those tools. So that's what I'm banking on.
I love it. I love it. All right, so Jam, dude, that was our first show together. Do you feel good? I feel pretty good.
Feel pretty good. I can't wait to do another one. I enjoyed this.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that. We're gonna close the show here. Thank you all so much for taking some time out of your day, whether you're listening to us live on Sunday evening, hanging out with us. We really appreciate all y'all in the chat. Whether you're listening to us the next morning, on Monday or later in the week, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I would venture to guess that y'all do as well. Whenever you are listening to us, thank you all so much for spending a little bit of time with us. for future work, we have the Tylers here on the YouTube channel, here on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and the podcast feed. They're going to be breaking down the 25 best prospects of the century. That's going to be dropping on the 29th. I am going to be locked and loaded tuning in. I'm going to be supporting them. I'm going to be yelling at my car radio for some of their takes. Sure. I'm just like everybody does, because you make lists for people to tell you that you're wrong. Like, that's the whole purpose of a list, right? Is for people to tell you that you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm ready to listen to that one. And then over on the Locked On NBA Draft podcast with No Ceilings, Nathan Grubel and Maxwell Baumbach, they're going to be having this audible symposium of how to scout guards in the 2026 NBA draft class. And I don't know how you feel about this, Jam. I feel like guards are kind of like my hardest position to scout, because I'm like, where is the line between a really good college basketball guard and an NBA guard? Hopefully we get that question answered for us. But yeah, for myself, I have on Monday, if you're listening to this, over at NoCeilingsNBA.com, I was able to interview the transfer from South Carolina State to Butler, Drayton Jones, the big man, probably one of the best, like, well-spoken players that I've talked to, Jam. Very fun to talk to, very well-spoken. I loved his mentality. He gave me a lot of insight, and I'm excited for that to be dropping at NoCeilingsNBA.com. Jam, what do you have going on kind of behind the scenes, brother?
Yeah, so right now behind the scenes, I'm working on a piece which should be finished this week and ahead of next week on one of the highest upside bigs, in my opinion, in this class, Magoon Guaf of San Diego State. So I'm excited to get to the rest of his film and be able to put together something for him next week. You know, like I said, one of the highest upside bigs in the class, and we don't have that many bigs in the class so far at the top of the scale. So we'll see how things shake out, and I think he can have a huge say in that.
And that takes me to this comment from username is Music Friend, the letters MF. So that's pretty cool. And then it brings me to what you said earlier, Jam, talking about next week. Next week, you and I are going to be back here, same bat time, same bat channel, to talk about the other freshman prospects that we are high on coming in. Music Friend said, how close is Mikal, that being Mikal Brown, to the top 3? I mean, who has a sexier name coming into the draft cycle outside the top 3 right now, Jam, than Mikal Brown?
It's hard to say what he did in FIBA, just continue to build that momentum. It's going to be an exciting race, and he certainly is very, very close in that top 3. And I wouldn't be surprised if some people have him firmly in that top 3 right now.
Yeah, he's going to be a name. We talked about Nick Kaminia earlier. I'm a big Braylon Mullins guy. You're going to hear me say his name a lot, so I'm going to bring his name to the table. Those just what we call primer, Jam, you know, in the podcast community. We're priming our audience a little bit. There we go. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us, though, here on the No Ceilings NBA Draft Show with the Draft Sickos. He is Jam Hines. Jam, your username over on X is at Jam on the Boards. I have that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Jam on the Boards, and then I am at Stephen G Hoops. Come follow us. Go to NoCeilingsNBA.com and subscribe there. Consider being a Plus member, because we just take what you gift us as a Plus member and give it all back to you. We get all the insight. We get to go to all the games. Jam and I were at Portsmouth together last year. I would love for us to be able to do that again this year. Please consider being a Plus member and get all the stuff that you guys want to know that you're not going to get anywhere else. And then like, share, subscribe, rate, and review. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It does more than you ever realize, and it goes a long way for us. But for my co-host Jam, for myself, for No Ceilings at Large, we will catch up with y'all next time. Much love, y'all.